Uh, Public Fleets webinar. We'll be getting started in a few minutes. We're going to give folks a little bit of time to log in and get their audio sorted out. Our meeting host today is Mac. He'll be recording the meeting and closing us out. And we have Beth, Yachin, and Jessica running the Q&A, and Sharin will be dropping links into the chat so our attendees can all have easy access to them. Like I said, we'll get started in a few minutes at about 10:05. All of our chat functions and speaking are going to be disabled. We'll go over that again. But if you would like to ask questions with the Q&A function, we do have panelists available to answer questions. So we'll try to get as many of those done through the presentation as we can. And then we'll also have a big block at the end to do nothing but answer questions. So don't feel like you need to save your questions for the end. But if you want to, feel free. But we will try to process questions out as quickly as we can as we're going through the presentation. If we see any big roadblocks, I can get stopped and back up a little or go back over things if absolutely necessary. All right, looks like our attendee numbers are still going up a little bit, so we'll just hold in there and let as many people log in as we can. There's about 900 people registered, so if we even get part of that number, it'll be a lot of people asking questions. All righty. Let's get started. So this webinar will be recorded and posted online if anyone would like to share it out later. It may take a couple of weeks to process and post. All attendees will have their mics and chat functions turned off for the duration of the webinar. We have a live Q&A function running with a team standing by to answer questions or let me know if I need to jump back or cover anything in more detail. Hello, everyone. My name is Duncan Fry. I'm with the Air Resources Board Compliance and Outreach Branch, and today we'll be talking about the Clean Truck Check program, which is also known as Heavy Duty Inspection and Maintenance. First, we're going to go into the program which currently exists, the Periodic Smoke Inspection Program. Then we'll transition to the requirements for the Heavy Duty Inspection and Maintenance Program, or the Clean Truck Check program. We'll get into the applicability of the regulations. We'll talk about the various start dates, including the remote monitoring requirements, and when the notice to submit to testing documents will be sent out. We'll also talk about the reporting and compliance fees associated with the program. We'll get into the periodic testing requirements and the start dates for those as well. Then we'll talk about the Clean Truck Check tester requirements, as well as the requirements for freight contractors, brokers, and facilities. And then finally, we'll finish up by talking about the available onboard diagnostic, or OBD, test device vendors. The current program in place is the Periodic Smoke Inspection Program. This has been a requirement since 1998, and as Clean Truck Check phases in, periodic smoke inspection requirements will phase out until they're completely replaced by Clean Truck Check. In order to be subject to the Periodic Smoke Inspection Program, a fleet does have to be California-based, consist of 2 or more diesel vehicles with a gross vehicle weight rating over 6,000 pounds, and if you own 2 or more vehicles, as I just described, you'll be subject to the regulation. If you only have 1 vehicle, you do not meet the requirements. The test is required to be conducted on any vehicle that has an engine model year older than 4 years old. And so if you have 2 trucks, one is 5 years old and the other is 2 years old, you're subject to the regulation, but you're only required to perform a test on the older vehicle until the newer engine reaches 4 years old. These are the current opacity limits. As you can see, most engines that are equipped with a diesel particulate filter will now have to meet an opacity limit of 5%. This is because if you have a particulate filter that's running correctly, it should ideally be emitting less than 1%. A DPF that's operating correctly is certified to remove 99.9% of particulates, and if it's emitting more than 2% or so, there's probably an issue like a crack in the ceramic of your DPF or some other emissions issue. Be aware that a lot of opacity readers are able to read a smoke level under 5% and even as low as in between 0 and 1%. And they'll give you an accurate reading, but the software hasn't been updated recently. It might give you a fail readout that's incorrect. The opacity limits were lowered in 2019, so if your software is out of date, you get a 6.5 opacity reading. It may say pass on the meter, but that would actually be a failing result. Double check with your meter manufacturer to make sure that the software has been updated. Equipment that is not filtered, such as some light-duty vehicles or heavy-duty vehicles that are using flexibility options in the truck and bus regulations, may have higher opacity limits. And vehicles that are equipped with off-road certified engines also have their own set of opacity limits that they need to comply with. Now we're going to go into the requirements for the Clean Truck Check program. Here are our major objectives today. We'll go over what the Clean Check program is and why it's needed, what entities are subject to the program, meaning to whom and to which vehicles does it apply, what are the requirements or responsibilities for each entity. These entities are vehicle owners and drivers, Clean Truck Check testers, freight contractors, brokers, freight facilities, and vendors of OBD testing devices. CARB's Clean Truck Check regulation took effect on January 1st, 2023. Later, when we present information on vehicle owners and driver requirements, we'll get into the various phases and start dates. The regulation requires non-gasoline vehicles with a gross vehicle weight rating over 14,000 pounds that operate in California, including vehicles registered out of state and out of country, to pass emissions compliance testings to continue legally operating in the state. Clean Truck Check is meant to be a similar program to California's Smog Check program, which doesn't currently include heavy-duty vehicles. Periodic Clean Truck Check inspections will ensure that a vehicle's emissions control systems are maintained and functioning properly. Vehicles with identified emission control malfunctions are required to be repaired in a timely manner to minimize emissions. Who is subject to Clean Truck Check? Owners and drivers of non-gasoline vehicles with a gross vehicle weight rating over 14,000 pounds that travel in California. Testers that perform Clean Truck Check compliance testing on vehicles subject to the program. Freight contractors and brokers that do business in California using vehicles and fleets that are subject to Clean Truck Check. And applicable freight facilities in California that allow heavy-duty vehicles onto their premises. Applicable freight facilities include seaport facilities, such as the terminals located in the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, and intermodal rail yards where cargo is transferred to or from a train, usually using a heavy-duty truck. Finally, OBD test device vendors that produce and sell the tools used to perform Clean Truck Check compliance tests using onboard diagnostic data downloaded from the vehicle's engine. The vehicles that are subject to the Clean Truck Check are any diesel, alternative fuel, diesel hybrid, or alternative fuel hybrid vehicle that operates in California and have a gross vehicle weight rating of greater than 14,000 pounds. This includes California registered vehicles, vehicles registered in other states or countries, and vehicles owned by the federal government not registered in any state or local jurisdiction. Single vehicle, fleets, or owner-operator vehicles are still subject to Clean Truck Check. So if you only have one vehicle, one truck, or one bus that meets this criteria, you are still included in the program. This is different than in the existing periodic smoke inspection program that only applies to California-based fleets with 2 or more vehicles. There are some categories of heavy-duty vehicle that are excluded from Clean Truck Check. Shown here is a complete list of vehicle types that are not subject to the regulation. These vehicles are zero-emission heavy-duty vehicles, emergency vehicles, which are defined in the California Vehicle Code, Section 165, tactical military vehicles, motorhomes registered outside of California that are used solely for recreational purposes, vehicles issued a permanent historic vehicle license plate, vehicles operating under a CARB-issued experimental permit, and out-of-state vehicles operating under a governor's emergency declaration are exempt for 30 days. So they do have to come into compliance after a 30-day period with the program. And finally, gasoline heavy-duty vehicles with a gross vehicle weight rating over 14,000 pounds are already subject to the California Bureau of Automotive Repairs Smog Check program, and therefore aren't subject to Clean Truck Check. The very last type of vehicle is vehicles certified with the most stringent optional low NOx 0.01 standard, but they're only exempt for the first 4 years of the program and are currently not available for sale. Typically, the NOx standard is the newest natural gas vehicles that are specifically certified under this new standard. Now we're going to talk about the basic requirements for vehicle owners and drivers, including how these requirements are phased in over the lifetime of Clean Truck Check. So vehicle owners must ensure all their applicable vehicles operating in California comply with the regulations requirements as they take effect over 3 phases. This also means that the vehicle owner responsibilities will ramp up over time. When the program first began with Phase 1 on January 1st, 2023, CARB deployed roadside emission monitoring devices that CARB refers to as peaks. They were deployed in various locations throughout California. They were used to monitor vehicle emissions during on-road driving. Based on these emissions readings, owners of vehicles detected as possible high emitters may receive a testing notice, which will require them to undergo a Clean Truck Check compliant test. The second phase of the Clean Truck Check regulation will require vehicle owners to report their vehicles to CARB and to pay an annual $30 compliance fee for each vehicle. These requirements become effective when CARB's Clean Truck Check database is operational, uh, scheduled to be no earlier than October 1st, 2023. And the third final phase of the regulation requires Clean Truck Check compliance testing for all vehicles operating in California. Testing deadlines are set to begin no earlier than July 4th, 2024, July 1st, 2024. CARB's periodic smoke inspection program, referred to as PSIP, will sunset when this third phase begins. CARB will inform vehicle owners and other regulated entities at least 90 days before the specific start dates of Clean Truck Check phases 2 and 3 to ensure that everyone has enough time to meet the requirements before any enforcement begins. As we mentioned, starting on January 1st, 2023, CARB started deploying remote emissions monitoring devices on high-traffic roadways throughout California. These devices measure NOx and PM exhaust emissions as vehicles pass by the unit, using cameras that take pictures of the vehicle's license plate number and linking this to the emissions reading of the vehicle while it's passing through the unit. We can identify potential high-emitting vehicles for follow-up compliance testing, and peaks are used only as a screening tool, not as a Clean Truck Check compliance test. An owner of a vehicle flagged as a potential high emitter will receive a notification letter from CARB called a Notice to Submit to Testing, or NST, requiring them to verify that their vehicle is Clean Truck Check compliant by submitting a compliance test to CARB. If the vehicle is flagged as a high emitter during a roadside inspection in which enforcement staff is present, the vehicle will be pulled over for additional screening. If the vehicle is found to be non-compliant with any Clean Truck Check requirements, such as emissions-related malfunction indicator light or diagnostic trouble code, a citation may be issued on site and provided to the operator. Enforcement is conducting both remote monitoring and roadside inspections now. And when a vehicle owner receives a Notice to Submit to Testing, or NST, they'll have 30 days to submit a passing compliance test to demonstrate to CARB that their vehicle is in compliance. This timeline is extended if you have an ag vehicle. Vehicles that fail a Clean Truck Check compliance test will need to repair any malfunctioning emissions-related control components and be retested to demonstrate compliance. If an owner fails to submit a passing compliance test to CARB within 30 days, CARB may issue the owner a citation, and the vehicle will be non-compliant until the owner takes action to bring it back into compliance by getting the vehicle repaired, if necessary, and submit a passing compliance test. Once the Clean Truck Check database is publicly available starting October 1st, vehicle owners will be able to access the public portal to create an account and report the vehicles in their fleets. Vehicle information will be imported from other CARB databases, so fleets shouldn't need to input all of their vehicles' information from scratch. Owners and managers will, however, need to verify that the imported vehicle information is correct and add any missing information. Vehicle owners will also use this account to pay the annual $30 compliance fee on a per vehicle basis. Fee collection will start no earlier than October 16th. This fee will be paid directly to CARB, not through the DMV, and is not part of your DMV registration. As we mentioned earlier, the reporting requirements and compliance fees won't be enforced any earlier than October 1st, 2023, and we will provide a notice to vehicle owners before enforcement begins. Fees for 2024 will be due based on each vehicle's compliance deadline, no earlier than July 2024. Notifications will be done through public outreach activities and will be available on CARB's main Clean Truck Check program webpage, as well as CARB's Truck Stop webpage. We'll also directly notify vehicle owners who subscribe to receive the Clean Truck Check updates via email. If you're a vehicle owner yourself, please visit CARB's Clean Truck Check main program webpage to subscribe or use the link in this slide or in the chat. CARB will notify vehicle owners and other regulated entities when the Clean Truck Check database is publicly operational and will provide tutorials with instructions on how to navigate and use the database. The final implementation phase of the Clean Truck Check regulation is when the periodic testing requirements start. The compliance testing requirements vary a bit based on vehicle type. When periodic testing begins in 2024, a single test will be required between July and December. Vehicles will be required to test 2 times per year at 6-month intervals based on the registration expiration date starting in 2025. And Clean Truck Check includes an exemption to the semi-annual testing frequency for California registered motorhomes and all agricultural vehicles, when registered, whether registered in California or not. These vehicles are only required to test annually rather than the 2 times per year. For vehicles equipped with onboard diagnostic systems, compliance testing will increase to 4 times per year, 3 years after periodic Clean Truck Check testing starts. For example, if periodic testing starts in 2024, OBD-equipped vehicles will be required to submit OBD data quarterly rather than semi-annually starting in 2027. There's no change in the testing frequency for non-OBD vehicles and California registered motorhomes and agricultural vehicles. As a reminder, once Clean Truck Check testing begins, this will replace the PSIP testing requirements. Vehicle owners are responsible for ensuring testing data to demonstrate the vehicle has passed its compliance tests is submitted to CARB by the deadlines specified in the regulation. Now, this is for California registered vehicles. And to provide flexibility for vehicle owners, passing test data may be submitted up to 90 days before the compliance deadline. This window allows owners to avoid potential last-minute repairs and delays as your registration or compliance deadlines approach. For California registered vehicles, compliance deadlines are based on the month and day of the DMV registration expiration. For example, the California registered vehicle expires on May 21st. The vehicle has a compliance testing deadline of May 21st. Once semi-annual testing requirements start in 2025, its other semi-annual compliance deadline would fall on November 21st of every year, 6 months opposite to May 21st. When testing frequency for most OBD-equipped vehicles increases to 4 times per year, the quarterly compliance deadline for the same vehicle would be the 21st of May, 21st of August, 21st of November, and 21st of February. The compliance deadline for California registered motorhomes and agricultural vehicles, which are only required to undergo compliance testing once per year, is the expiration day and month of the DMV registration. In all cases, a vehicle's $30 compliance fee will be due during the first testing deadline of each year. For vehicles non-California registered and DMV exempt plates, like many of the public transit fleets that we're talking to today, the compliance deadlines are based on the last digit of the vehicle's identification number. Again, this also applies to vehicles that aren't registered in any state vehicle registration system, like federal fleets. A vehicle's compliance deadline is on the last day of the month based on the assigned months. So if you look at the table, each number 0 through 9 is assigned a month, as shown in the table. If the VIN's number ends in 7, the vehicle has a periodic compliance testing deadline of May 31st. And then the semi-annual testing and quarterly testing follow the same pattern as California registered vehicles. These vehicles may also submit their compliance testing results within the 90 days before their compliance deadline and pay their vehicle compliance fee before the first deadline of each year. The type of clean truck compliance test that is required is based on the model year of the engine of a vehicle. For vehicles that have OBD systems, the testing method requires submitting certain OBD data to CARB's Clean Truck Check database. And OBD-equipped vehicles have a 2013 and newer model year engine or hybrid systems with a 2013 or newer model year diesel engines. OBD-equipped alternative fuel vehicles have 2018 and newer model year engines and hybrid systems with 2018 and newer model year alternative fuel systems. Non-OBD diesel vehicles with pre-2013 model year engines are subject to the SAE J1667 smoke opacity test procedure used in the existing heavy-duty vehicle and periodic smoke inspection program. So, for non-OBD vehicles, you would continue doing the smoke opacity test that was required for PSIP. These vehicles are also required to undergo a new vehicle emissions control equipment inspection that's referred to as a visual inspection. For OBD vehicles, the Clean Truck Check test must be performed using a testing device that meets certain technical specifications, including format submission requirements, and only approved devices can be used to download and submit this information. OBD testing devices include equipment such as a dongle supplied by a telematics service provider, or a handheld scan tool with a specialized software that connects to the vehicle's OBD port under the driver's side dashboard. Using the OBD testing device, certain information that confirms proper operation of the vehicle's emission-related components and systems are collected and submitted to CARB's Clean Truck Check. And a passing compliance test submissions means there are no emissions-related component issues. For example, that the malfunction indicator light is not on, and then there isn't an emission-related diagnostics trouble code. For non-OBD vehicles, the compliance smoke meters are used to perform compliance testing. Non-OBD vehicles must also undergo a new vehicle emissions control equipment inspection. The inspection includes a visual inspection of the emissions control components on the vehicle to ensure that they are still in proper configuration and that they have not been tampered with. Only diesel non-OBD vehicles are required to undergo the smoke opacity test. Non-OBD alternative fuel vehicles are exempt from the opacity test and are only required to undergo the vehicle emissions control equipment inspection as part of the vehicle compliance test. Here's a table of the allowable smoke opacity levels for on-road engines. They range from 5% on engines with DPFs to 40% for old pre-1991 model year engines if they're still in legal operation. Again, these opacity limits have been in effect since 2019. And if your diesel truck with a DPF has an opacity of higher than around 2%, something is going on and needs to be fixed. In the rare situation in which an off-road engine is used in an on-road vehicle, new opacity limits for off-road engines came into effect January 1st, 2023. So all compliance testing must be performed and submitted to CARB by a credentialed Clean Truck Check tester. The only exception to this is for OBD test results that are submitted to CARB through a telematics service provider. In this case, the telematics service provider is required to use a CARB-verified OBD test device to submit test data. Anyone can become a credentialed Clean Truck Check tester. Credentialed testers may be the vehicle owner that want to do their own compliance testing, employees of fleets that only test their own fleet vehicles, or private for-hire testers. The testing exam is currently available. Please check CARB's Clean Truck Check program webpage for a list of publicly credentialed Clean Truck Check testers and their contact information. This information is updated regularly, so you can visit the website today for the most up-to-date list. We're working on an improved version of this list that will have enhanced filters to find testers in your area that fit your vehicle's specific needs. When you take the Clean Truck Test exam, there's a section on the exam where you can choose whether or not to publicly publish your information as well. So a few tips on compliance. First, it's important that you perform regular inspections on your vehicle, including all emissions-related control components and systems. Make sure to keep up current with the manufacturer-recommended vehicle and engine maintenance. When an emissions-related malfunction is detected, inspect and repair your vehicle as soon as possible. Signs that your vehicle may have an emission-related malfunction include the mill is illuminated or flashing on the vehicle's dashboard. Visible smoke can be seen coming out of the exhaust pipe. An engine with a properly functioning DPF should not have visible smoke. A noticeable impact on the fuel economy is present. Emissions-related issues can occur at the same time and potentially be the cause of the fuel economy reduction. Main takeaway is don't delay scheduled maintenance and necessary repairs. and also make sure to stay on top of any manufacturer's recalls. CARB may issue a vehicle owner a citation for failing to comply with the Clean Truck Check regulation, such as failing to demonstrate compliance within 30 calendar days of receiving a notice to submit to testing, or failing to submit a passing periodic compliance test by the deadline we discussed earlier. Vehicles will be considered non-compliant until they clear the citation through CARB and pay any required penalties. Non-compliant California registered vehicles will also risk having their DMV registrations blocked until the vehicles are brought back into compliance. Citations that are not cleared in the time frames provided by CARB could result in vehicle registration holds and further penalties, including removal of the vehicle from service until the issue is resolved. To avoid these additional penalties, it is very important to work with CARB and remedy non-compliant and citation issues as quickly as possible. Depending on the violation that caused the citation, CARB may require vehicle owners to submit additional documentation beyond a passing vehicle compliance test to clear the citation. This could include information related to the repair orders and invoices, demonstrating proof that the vehicle's emissions issue has been remedied, and information on who performed the necessary repairs. CARB may require a referee to conduct the emissions testings, in which case you would be notified that that specific task is required. Vehicle drivers also have responsibilities for complying with Clean Truck Check. When CARB and other state agencies, enforcement staff, such as the California Highway Patrol, perform roadside vehicle inspections, drivers should follow the instructions of the inspector and drive to the designated inspection site. This is for the safety of the inspector, the driver, and the vehicle. When requested by the instructor, present a driver's license, vehicle registration, and other related documents required by law or regulation. The inspector will likely request to perform a roadside compliance check and vehicle inspection. When directed to do so by the inspector, open the vehicle's door and the hood to the engine to allow the inspector to inspect the vehicle. Please follow any other directions given by the inspector to speed up the inspection of the vehicle. Failure to allow an inspection is a violation of the Clean Truck Check regulation requirements, as well as the California Health and Safety Code, and can result in enforcement action and penalties. As a reminder, if your vehicle is found to be out of compliance with Clean Truck Check requirements or any other CARB regulations during a roadside inspection, a citation may be issued. Notice to submit to testing are only issued in cases where an inspector was not present or when the vehicle was remote detected as a potential high emitter. Now we're going to talk about the Clean Truck Check tester requirements. Individuals that successfully complete this Clean Truck Check tester training course and pass the exam may become a credentialed Clean Truck Check tester and perform compliance tests. The test is available now. After passing the exam, you'll be issued a certificate of completion and a unique tester ID number. You'll use this tester ID number anytime you perform a Clean Truck Check compliance test and submit test results to CARB. Clean Truck Check tester credentials are valid for 2 years from the date you complete the training and pass the exam. And to continue as a Clean Truck Check tester, you'll need to take the training again before your ID number expires, which is your credential. If you don't retake the training before your tester ID number expires, you'll be unable to perform compliance testing until you retake the course and pass the exam. If you would like your tester information and contact info to be displayed on our website, make sure you select that option when you pass the exam. As a credentialed Clean Truck Check tester, it is your responsibility to perform all compliance tests as specified in the Clean Truck Check regulation and as described in the training course. Failure to follow the required test procedures and regulation requirements may cause CARB to revoke your Clean Truck Check testing credential. OBD compliance tests submitted will automatically upload to CARB's Clean Truck Check database when properly performed using CARB-verified OBD devices. The OBD training module provides details on this testing process. Non-OBD compliance tests submissions are required to be emailed directly to CARB using the process described in detail in the smoke opacity testing and vehicle emissions control equipment inspection training modules. after performing the vehicle emissions control equipment inspection and smoke capacity test, if it's a diesel vehicle. The Clean Truck Check tester must email the information to CARB at the link above, which can be seen in the subject line. The subject line of the email to CARB must contain non-OBD vehicle compliance test, the VIN number, your Clean Truck Check tester ID. An example subject line is shown here on the slide. Testers must attach the compliance data and signed vehicle emissions control equipment inspection form. Remember that the form has 2 pages. Both pages must be scanned and submitted to CARB. If applicable, the tester must scan, upload, and attach the accompanying smoke capacity test receipt or electronic test results in the same email. For non-OBD results, you should receive a response from CARB within 72 hours confirming the results of your test. Clean Truck Check regulation allows CARB to hold all entities associated with the vehicle undergoing compliance testing accountable for making sure that the tests are complete or performed properly. The data submitted to CARB is accurate. This means CARB credentialed testers themselves, companies or entities that employ their own testers for in-house compliance testing, and vehicle owners all have a stake in the compliance testing process. Through CARB's Clean Truck Check enforcement provisions, we have the ability to revoke the tester credential of any tester found to be in violation of any of the requirements in the Clean Truck Check regulation, such as improperly performing compliance testing, purposely submitting inaccurate data, or using testing equipment not approved by CARB. We can also prohibit testers from retesting and renewing their expired or revoked credentials, and prohibit entities from employing their own Clean Truck Check testers based on violations. Additional enforcement penalties can also be assessed, depending on the severity of the violations, and can extend to the vehicle owner and the company or entity that employs the tester. The next portion of the presentation provides an overview of the requirements for freight contractors, brokers, and freight facilities. Freight contractors, brokers, and applicable freight facilities have a responsibility under the regulation to verify that vehicles they work with or allow to operate on their properties are Clean Truck Check compliant. Contractors are people or entities such as shippers, receivers, and governmental agencies that enter into contracts required that the operation of heavy-duty vehicles. Brokers are people that arrange the transportation for shipment and compensation. Just a moment. And applicable freight facilities are seaports and intermodal rail yards where heavy-duty vehicles operate to move cargo. Freight contractors and brokers must obtain Clean Truck Check compliance documentation from any companies they contract with that have vehicles operating in California, and keep copies of those records to provide to CARB enforcement upon request. It's important to note that these requirements are consistent with existing requirements already in place in other CARB regulations. Applicable freight facilities, which are seaports and intermodal rail yards, must check vehicles entering their properties to verify Clean Truck Check compliance. If a vehicle does not have documentation of compliance, the freight facility can either turn the vehicle away, or they can maintain records of the non-compliant vehicle to provide to CARB enforcement staff upon request. The reason for requiring entities in the supply chain to also verify Clean Truck Check compliance is to create another incentive for vehicle owners to maintain compliance. When businesses are encouraged to contract with compliant vehicles and fleets, this helps level the playing field for vehicles operating in California and improve the local air quality in the surrounding communities. These requirements presented here are timed to take effect at the same time enforcement begins for vehicle owners reporting and compliance fee payments, which means no earlier than October 2023. Now we'll discuss the onboard diagnostic tests vendors, and the website is updated regularly as more become available. So please keep an eye out on the OBD test vendor tab on the Clean Truck Check webpage. Device vendors must verify that the devices meet CARB's technical specifications and OBD data formatting and submission requirements before they're eligible for sale and use for the Clean Truck Check compliance testing. Only OBD devices that have successfully demonstrated they've met CARB's requirements can be used to perform vehicle compliance testing. Devices that do not meet CARB's requirements are ineligible to be used in compliance testing and will result in failed OBD compliance tests. To find a list of verified devices and device vendor information, please access CARB's main Clean Truck Check regulation webpage and click on OBD test devices on the left sidebar. As more vendors complete the verification process, this list will be updated to allow the public to know which devices meet CARB's requirements. And this is an image of a sample of what the interface looks like. As you can see, the photos were taken in the field, so there's a little bit of glare. The interface automatically uploads the results to the CARB's Clean Truck Check database. Here's an example of a passing test result. The information included is in the passing test results. We'll have the vehicle information as input by the tester information, which must have a credentialed tester ID in order to be a passing result. And the result will indicate a pass. For the OBD test submission, the result is normally received relatively immediately, normally within a few minutes based on your service and your Wi-Fi. For a failing submission, again, fails are notified via email. The vehicle information will still be included as well as all of the tester information. The results will also show you an overall test result of fail. They will indicate some diagnostic trouble code that caused the vehicle to fail. On this one, you can see that there was an issue with the DPF, differential pressure, the after treatment, and some turbocharger issues as well. For more information, you can visit the Clean Truck Check program website. We do have a list of smoke meter manufacturers for available smoke meters, and Clean Truck Check tester training course is available now, and we have that link as well. If you do have additional questions, please email our staff and the Heavy Duty Inspection and Maintenance email, which is hdim@arb.ca.gov. You can also find this information if you look up CARB Clean Truck Check Heavy Duty Inspection and Maintenance Program. And this concludes our presentation. Thank you for listening. And we'll spend the rest of our time answering questions. We do have a hard cutoff at noon, and we'll capture and send out as many responses as soon as we can get them processed. So let's take a look at the Q&A.
Thank you, Duncan. This is Jessica Johnson. We have a number of questions that we've been answering in the chat. So, I'm sorry, excuse me, to be specific, the question and answer feature of Zoom. So Duncan, if you could take a look at some of the answered questions and maybe recap those verbally, that would be helpful. We also have a number of questions about some specifics about OBD and how testing will work with PSIP, especially next year.
Okay, I'll cover that one first. So PSIP requirements that take effect for specific vehicles before July of next year, you will go through your normal PSIP testing. If your PSIP test happens to be within 90 days of your registration deadline, you can use your PSIP results for the opacity test under Clean Truck Check. If your registration expires before July, your secondary testing date will be 6 months opposite to that. So if you are processing, if you're pardon me, if your registration expires in May and you need a PSIP test to comply in May, your follow-up test in 2024 for Clean Truck Check would be in November, 6 months after May. All right. So,
While Duncan's doing that, I wanted to emphasize to folks that we will provide a copy of the presentation via email to the folks that have attended today, and we will be posting the recording on our website. And we can email everybody who registered for that to let them know when the recording is available.
yep. Then Aaron James answered a question, or asked a question about, would privately owned diesel RVs over 14,000 pounds be required to test in Clean Truck Check? And the answer is yes. They will be required to test one time a year, and their testing deadline is based on their DMV registration, as long as they're registered in California. So within 90 days of your DMV registration expiration, you can get a Clean Truck Check test done and submit it through CARB's database, and then you can register your vehicle as normal. It's essentially just bringing diesel vehicles into the same compliance structure as light duty vehicles in the smog check. Do we have an answer of how many vehicles have been flagged by remote monitoring devices so far?
I can field that one.
Thank you, Beth.
Sure. So for the notice to submit to testing using these remote devices, we have mobile and stationary ones as well. I'll throw several numbers at you right now. So for the mobile units, about 16,000 vehicles have been screened. For the permanently placed units, about 310,000 vehicles have been screened. We've also conducted about 6,000 roadside inspections, a lot of which were in disadvantaged communities. So that's something that we're trying to focus on. And about 1,500 notice to submit to testing letters have been issued since February the 10th of this year. So there's some numbers for you.
Thank you, Beth.
Certainly.
So
do you want me to field that process or penalties one?
sure.
Okay. We don't have enforcement, I don't think, on the call today, so I'm going to very carefully answer this question. We certainly have limitations in the health and safety code relative to, $1,000, $10,000 per vehicle per day, and some caps on some of these things. So it really enforcement has a lot of discretion on how to handle each situation. They look at everything from economic hardship to intent to comply. Let's say you started testing and maybe you didn't have a compliant test and it's getting really close to the deadline and you went a few days past it and you're still trying to repair the vehicle or something. They look at things like that. They look at non-compliance with other CARB regulations. I mean, there's way more bullets than I'm going to go through right now, but they look at a lot. There's definitely enforcement discretion there. And it would apply to anyone operating in California, whether they're registered here or not. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Certainly.
And then the question of how does this differ from the opacity check due each year? And the major answer to that is if your vehicle doesn't have an OBD port, it's the same. It's exactly the same with an additional visual inspection of your vehicle. The enhancement is that if you have an OBD vehicle, you can simply have it plugged in and have the test go through automatically. So instead of having to go to some place that does opacity testing, you can plug in your testing device and be done in a few minutes.
Do you care if I take the 10.1 or 10.16 one as well?
Go ahead.
All right, thanks, Duncan. So the reporting system will be open on October the 1st. You can go in and report your owner and vehicle information. You'll have all the way until the end of the year to get all of that information in, as well as pay your compliance fees. So the system will be open on October the 1st. No later than October the 16th, we will have the compliance fee portion worked into the system. We just want to make sure that everything's stable. We're not hearing any feedback from anyone relative to entering the owner and vehicle information. And we feel very comfortable with October the 16th being the launch for the compliance fee payment. And you'll have, like I said, you'll have until the end of the year to take care of that. We also will have a batch upload, which I think Duncan mentioned this maybe already. We'll have a batch upload feature for both vehicles and the compliance fees.
Why don't you take that next one as well, Beth?
Okay, let me read this. Is there a way to check to see? Oh, certainly. You can certainly call the hotline and ask that question, and they can look it up in the database, or you can email the 866 email or even the HDINM email and check on that. There's also an enforcement email, and I just don't want to say the incorrect one because enforcement has several emails that they put on the NST letter. And that's something I could provide to Duncan later or try and check on it right now, maybe while he's answering questions and see what that is, unless Hung Lee knows what it is.
Okay. As fleets are seeing issues with parts acquisitions, I can see a scenario where a truck would fail a compliance test but not be able to make repairs within 30 days in time to retest. What happens in this case? So in this case, we do make allowances for not being able to get parts. As long as you can prove that you are going through due diligence to get everything repaired, you can get in touch with CARB enforcement and they will give you an extension. It's based on the dates of parts arriving and everything else, but they will be able to extend out the problem or extend out the deadline. We want to make sure that no one is taken off the road due to circumstances out of their control. If a fleet is exempt when our registration dates determined for deadlines, if your fleet is exempt or outside California, all of the registration deadlines or all of the testing deadlines will be determined by the VIN number. I can actually go back to the table that has all the VIN number information in it. Just a moment. There we are. So as you can see in the table, there is a month determiner based on the number of the final number of the VIN from 0 to 9, and all of the information is based off of that table. If units are registered in California but run their life in other states, will they still need testing done? The answer to that is yes. In order to register through the DMV, you will have to submit a CARB compliant test. As a school district, if a school bus fails, can it still be used on the road? So all of the fails to the compliance testing will take the vehicle out of compliance, and then you're within that deadline of needing to get the vehicle repaired before it becomes a citation issue. So you technically can still drive the vehicle as long as you're making due diligence to get it repaired, and then submit a test, passing test before the 30 days expires. When will more information and instructions be available for the new database? Beth, are you still there to answer that one?
I am, sorry. I'm trying to get that email address real quick off to the side here. So we're working on several things right now. One of my staff recently recorded, broken up into several little modules of, even though it's really not very complicated, but she did break it up into several modules, sort of a hands-on webinar, recorded webinar type of thing. And so we're taking a look at those this week to see if we want to do anything different with those. We also have a very small group of fleet representatives that we have joining us for a webinar for a quick walkthrough of the database to see if they have any input. That's next week that we're doing that. And then around the end of next week, we would be looking at starting to post some of those things. As well as another thing we're working on also is a user guide. So if you were subject to truck and bus and used truckers, and there was always a user guide. I oversaw the implementation of truck and bus before I started overseeing the implementation of the clean truck check. So I'm very familiar with truckers and truck and bus. So it'll be very similar to that with screenshots and some very, step-by-step instructions, but it should be really straightforward, not nearly as complicated as truck and bus and truckers for sure. So over the next 2 weeks, you'll start seeing a lot more information on that.
Okay. I actually just noticed I missed a question right at the top. For 2009 and older engine model years, the requirements are the same. They'll just be opacity testing, and the opacity limits are all based on the engine model year as long as the vehicle is still in legal operation. To answer Jennifer McMillan, who can review the fleet inventory, input the fleet information, and pay fees in October? Do you need to be a certified tester to complete this? You do not need to be a certified tester to complete that information. Vehicle owners, fleet managers, all of those people can input all of that information. As long as you are legally responsible for the information on that truck, you can enter that information. Certified testers will not be needed until compliance tests start next year. And if your vehicle has a compliance deadline of July, the earliest you could conceivably start getting testing done would be April, so you could start testing 90 days before your deadline hits, if your deadline happened to be July 1st. So the specific information on the SAE J1667 opacity test is the current opacity test. So the test for heavy duty inspection and the periodic smoke inspection test, that is the SAE J1667. So the test will be the same. Beth or Hung Lee, do you have an answer on which emissions test should be performed on a pre-2013 model year diesel engine with an OBD?
Yes, I can answer that question.
Thanks.
2013, those are not the full function of OBD. We call EMD or EMD plus. They don't provide enough data to help us to make a determination, pass or fail the OBD data submission. So that's why for 2013 engine model year, we still require them to do opacity test.
Okay, thank you, Hung Lee.
Thank you.
Duncan or Beth, we have several questions about how compliance fees can be paid. What are the methods of payments that will be available? Would you please repeat that?
Yeah, if you can hang on just a second, I got the email address finally. So it's HD as in heavy duty, HD vehicle enforcement at arb.ca.gov.
And Beth, can you recap what that email address is for?
It is for if you believe you might have received a notice to submit to testing because you were picked up on one of our systems as a potential high emitter, and you believe that the driver may not have given it to you or something like that. That was the question. And so that's,
Great.
you could email to find out. That's the direct line to enforcement to find out if you actually got, received one or were sent one and didn't receive it.
Great, thank you.
Certainly.
And Sharon has dropped that email address in the chat if you missed it when
Thank
Beth
you.
spelled it out. Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you.
Okay, and what was the last question? Sorry, I sidetracked myself.
About payment methods for
Yeah.
the fee.
Yeah, so we have credit card and debit card, and with a lot of work, we finally laid in the e-check system. So we're testing that all right now to make sure it's working properly. And so those will be the 3 methods that are available. Very happy we got e-checks in there.
Thank you. This is just a confirmation question. So starting July 21st, 2024, we will need to complete a periodic clean truck check. So if we have a truck registration that expires 7/1/24, we have 90 days prior to that date to submit a passing test result. That is correct. So you have a 90-day window in between your registration expiration and your clean truck check compliance test. So whatever your expiration date is, you have 90 days before that for next year. And once we move into the biannual testing and the quarterly testing, you will still have 90 days prior to your deadline to get that done. So when we enter into quarterly testing, you essentially get your truck tested every 90 days. Is biannual testing required for off-road and carb low-use vehicles? Hung Lee, do you have an answer for that one?
If he doesn't, it sounds like they're talking about truck and bus too, maybe, and I'm happy to field it if you'd rather me take that one.
Yeah, go ahead, Beth.
All right. There is no low use provision in the clean truck check, heavy duty inspection and maintenance regulation. And so that it doesn't exist there. So that wouldn't be taken into consideration if they were operating as low use, say under truck and bus. And as far as biannual testing, it would be twice a year unless they fell under the agricultural vehicle provision that is only once a year.
Thank you. Is Fleet.io allowed to report OB HDMI testing? That would be definitely an implementation question for devices that are allowed to be used. And you can find an updated list on the Clean Truck Check webpage. They may not be available now. The Clean Truck Check group is going through different testers and trying to get as many certified as possible, working with device vendors. And we do plan on having that list be expanded greatly by the time we get to the compliance deadline starting next year. And the question is, do all trucks coming to California beginning 2024 require a Clean Truck Check cert and the unit entered into the database? What about units coming into California in the first quarter of next year? And will there be another inspection due later in the year based on the VIN deadline? Vehicles coming into California will be required to be in the database and have the fee paid to be considered to be in compliance. They will not require a emissions check until their clean truck testing deadline after July. And we are going to do our best to get information out to other states and other countries so people know what's coming. Is there a list of hardware and software suppliers that meet the reporting requirements? Yes, they're available on the Clean Truck Check website, and there is an OBD device list with a link on the left-hand side. How often are non-OBD vehicles tested under the new program? Once the program phases in completely, they will be required to test biannually, unless they are a California registered motorhome or an agricultural vehicle, and then there will be once per year. What if it's a bus and it's 2006, but it has an OBD? Those OBD devices don't transmit enough information to give us a good reading on the compliance data. So you will have to do a compliant opacity test for anything older than 2013.
Just want to add for that, many CNG bus, if they are 2018 or older engine model year, then they do opacity. They don't have to do opacity test. They just need to submit a visual inspection form to us, and that will fulfill all the requirement. For 2018 and newer CNG engine using on the bus, and then they have to do OBD submission. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Eng Lee. What is the timeline for using telematics to submit test results? You'll be able to set in the telematics device what dates you want it to submit information. That's pretty much it. You'll tell your telematics service provider what dates you need to submit data to CARB, and that information will be submitted. If you have a customer whose registration is due January 2024, when do I test his unit? It sounds like we're not doing any testing until July 1st, 2024. That is correct. So if their registration is due in January, their compliance test would be due in July.
I'd like to add just a little bit to that, just to make sure it's super clear, even though we've probably said it a couple of times already. And so the July 1 is a very aggressive timeline and date, but that is what we are certainly shooting for and believe we can hit. So it only applies to deadlines that folks have that are July 1, 2024 or later, and that they have the 90 days prior to that. Therefore, at the beginning of April, they can start testing, which we highly, highly recommend, because all it takes is one compliant test and you're in the clear. And so if you do need to make repairs, it's best that you check sooner than later in case you do need to make a repair and then test again. You want to have time for that and not unnecessarily get a registration hold on the vehicle. That's my 2 cents really quickly on that.
Thank you, Beth. So is the vehicle $30 compliance fee that it needs to be paid prior to December 31st, 2023 is for 2023. In 2024, there will be another compliance fee due before your vehicle's first compliance deadline, which in 2024, there's only one. So your second compliant your 2024 fee will be due in between July and December of the end of December of 2024. Diesel trucks that go into the smog shop do not need to follow this. I think that's for lighter duty vehicles, right? So if the vehicle is under 14,000 pounds and gets smogged, it is not covered under Clean Truck Check. If it's over 14,000 pounds, it will need to come into compliance with the new Clean Truck Check regulations. Does the certified tester have to be the one who submits the test directly to CARB, or can someone do it on their behalf? For example, if our company is completing the OBD tests internally, can our air compliance managers submit who would not be performing the tests, submit the tests on behalf of one of the employees that is a certified tester?
The answer is no. The must submitted by credential tester. The credential tester, there's a test ID associated with their email address. So they must submit the test result with the test ID and also their registered email address. So that way we will receive the OBD test data. Thank you.
Will registration be blocked if there's an emissions software recall that is not performed?
Do you want me to field that?
Sure.
I mean, if you're comfortable, it's fine. I just wanted to make sure.
No, I think I know the answer, but go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. This is just one of those referee program, inspections that would be referred over to that program. Things like this, if there's suspected tampering, if the emission systems aren't working properly, those are the types of things that get referred over to the referee program to ensure the viability of what we believe the issue is and how long it would take to repair that or take care of the recall or something like that. And so that would be how you would get a compliance extension if that were the case. And I'm sure that's what Duncan would have said. So
Right. What dictates a pass or fail once an OBD data is sent to CARB during biannual submissions? Essentially, if your OBD device detects a problem with the emission system, then you will fail. If it doesn't, you will pass. And if you fail, then you'll receive a notice that you have 30 days to bring the vehicle back into compliance. Then our oil workover rigs that have an on-road engine subject to this program. Hung Lee, do you have a good answer for that?
The first thing we want to look at is this tractor has a California DMV restriction or not. If it is a California DMV restriction, yes, then this one will subject to the program. But if the tractor is only used for off-road purpose, then they don't subject to this requirements.
Okay. Thank you, Hung Lee.
Thank you.
How will CARB enforce non-compliance of Clean Truck Check by government agencies with exempt plates? CARB enforcement will be able to check them at inspection stations, and they'll be subject to the same inspection that anyone else might be. And if they are not CARB compliant, they will receive a citation. Can a credentialed tester send the test into an admin who can email the results to CARB? Some mechanics may not be computer savvy. All of the compliance testing devices are all have to be Wi-Fi enabled and will submit the test automatically after completing the test. For non-OBD tests, the tester will have to enter all of their credentialed information. I'm sure if they are not computer savvy, an admin can help them through that process a couple of times and train them up to the point where it's they're capable of doing it without any help. The testing results are pretty simple. If you don't have an electrically connected or an internet connected opacity meter, it can require a little bit more work with scanning everything in and everything else, which will definitely be a learning curve for everyone involved. But I have all confidence in someone that can break down a diesel engine and also being able to run a scanner. It will take some practice, but I don't foresee any long-term problems with that one. And if you really need to, your admin can also go through the clean truck check tester stuff, so they can go through and administer the tests along with the mechanic. So how will this affect vehicles that have SE plates and registration is paid every 5 years? Their clean truck check deadlines will be based on the last value of the VIN, just like all other non-California registered and DMV exempt vehicle plates. So their registration, their clean truck check deadlines will be based on their VIN number rather than on their registration. Is the only requirement for CNG heavy-duty transit bus to perform a visual emissions control inspection. If the vehicle is older than 2018, then yes, they have to go through the visual emissions control inspection. If they are newer than 2018 or newer, then they'll be subject to the OBD test. Will there be a public database of compliant vehicles? Or how would a broker be able to determine if a vehicle is compliant? Hung Lee or Beth, would you like to take that one?
Sorry about that. Just took me a minute there. So it kind of depends on what type of facility that you are. Certainly, for ports and rail yards, we've been working consistently with them to provide them what we would call a good VIN list, and so that they know before the person enters the facility, they'll, every day they'll have every 24 hours it'll refresh, and they'll know, whether it's that truck complies with clean truck check or not before it tries to enter the facility and that type of thing. And then the certificates will be provided once we finish reporting at the end of this year for fleets that report all of their vehicles, pay all of their compliance fees. And as long as the vehicle is reported and the compliance fees paid, it complies this year. And then starting next year, they would also have to have recorded in a reporting system that they have met their periodic testing requirements. Which would only be one for next year for everybody. But after that, it would depend on what category you fell into as to whether it was more than one time per year.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.
How long to keep your records? 2 years. So for records to keep for CARB enforcement personnel, 2 years. We have about 10 vehicles that are OBD, but they're between 2001 and 2010. Are they subject to opacity testing? The answer to that is yes. Any vehicle older than 2013 does not submit the correct emissions information through the OBD port, so it needs to be run through opacity testing. Now that motorhomes are required to be tested annually, does this include those that are submitted via EDVR as a vehicle is converted into motorhomes?
Do you want me to take that, or are you familiar with EDVR?
I would like you to take that one, please.
So that's another truck and bus one where that originated from, and that was the SB1 effort as opposed to SB 210, which is the Clean Truck Check program. And so that once they were approved in Edinburgh, that meant that that motor home, that vehicle had been converted to a motor home, therefore was not subject to truck and bus. And that is all that applied to. So that does not remove them. Motorhomes are subject to Clean Truck Check, depending upon whether they are registered in California or not. Thanks.
Thank you. These units would be leased for 4 or 5 years. I imagine that's a question on if we lease a vehicle, are we required to do the Clean Truck Check on leased vehicles? The answer is yes. Just like if you lease a passenger car and it happens to be older than 5 years old, which I don't think happens very often, but you do have to submit smog checks before getting the vehicle registered. It's exactly the same process through Clean Truck Check. What is considered compliance documentation for electronics tests? Is it a copy of the OBD test email? We'll be sending out certifications once vehicles are in compliance. So this year, that'll be when they are in the database and pay their fee. And next year, it'll be when they're in the database, pay their fee, and submit a test, a compliance test that passes. Are small fleet, low population county public fleets required to do testing? The answer is yes. If it's a vehicle that's over 14,000 GVW that burns something other than gasoline, it will be subject to all of the same testing, unless it's in the short list of exempt vehicles. So hopefully that answers that question. I maintain fire engines and we perform PSIP tests and keep records. Do we need to purchase OBD software and maintain records of the OBD tests? Because they're fire engines, they're emergency vehicles, they will not be subject to the Clean Truck Check.
Can I add something to that to qualify it a little bit?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so they do have to meet it's the same throughout all of our fleet regs that I'm familiar with, which is a lot. But if it's an authorized emergency vehicle per the vehicle code, then that's correct. We certainly have had over the years a lot of vehicle owners that purchase former authorized emergency vehicles and potentially use them privately in a certain neighborhood or use it for, other purposes. And so once it's been repurposed and doesn't really meet the authorized emergency vehicle definition anymore, then that would not be true. But assuming they are authorized emergency vehicles, and Duncan's absolutely correct.
Right. And that follows the same logic for the tactical military vehicles. Tactical military vehicles have a very, very narrow definition. They have to be deployable and owned by the US government. They can't be for domestic use only. So if a police department buys an AMRAP, even though it's a military vehicle, it is no longer a deployable military vehicle and would be under the Clean Truck Check. If a truck is under 4 years old, are we required? Hung Lee's got that one. When will CARB be ready to present the online registration interface? We are under the impression that we're ready by October, and we need visibility to be requirements. Large fleets will have a lot of data to manage for this. The database should be open on October 1st, and a lot of information that has already gone into CARB databases should port over automatically. For large fleets, you will need to verify that that information is correct. But you will have in between October 1st and December 31st to get all your information entered and fees paid. So it will be a lot of work. We are aware of that. But hopefully 3 months will be long enough.
And I'll tack onto that really quickly, since truckers will be the main place. If they're, already reported in one of CARB's databases, truckers would be the main place that would be true for, that they would have that reported already. And so the CSV download that you can do from truckers will then be able to be brought over and uploaded into the Clean Truck Check database. We're fully prepared for that.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Is there a way to verify that an NST was sent? That would be the email that Beth mentioned that Sharon dropped into the chat. It's the HD enforcement. So you should be able to contact them to find out if an NST has been sent to you. And then for the MS 529 course for certification, does anyone have an answer for that one?
Hung Lee,
Yeah,
you
I
want to take? Thank you.
Yeah, I think like for opacity tester, and that's good for PSIP, and that will be good until next year, July 2024, to fulfill PSIP opacity test requirements. But starting from for Clean Truck Check, we suggest you can take a free online Clean Truck Check credential tester training and exam, and that one just need to renew annually, and you can easily pass 80%. You pass the exam, and you can get a tester ID for the same purpose.
Thank you, Hung Lee. All right, so how do we determine the testing deadlines for the following scenarios? Trucks that pay DMV registration monthly, trucks with SE plates where the registration only expires once every 5 years, trucks that are non-opt. Some of these trucks do not even start. How are they supposed to test? And trucks that have apportioned plates, do they fall under California registration or under non-California registered? That might be a good question for Beth.
Sorry, having problems unmuting myself there. So Hung Lee will have to correct me if I misspeak on anything. I guess I should mention that I did actually take over implementation about 6 weeks ago. So I'm definitely being very careful to not misspeak if I missed a nuance in the regulation as I finish getting my feet wet in this group. But the DMV registration monthly should start similar when we talked about SE plates earlier, whenever that would, normally hit each year, even if you did it, say 2 seasons for harvest or something, and you do 3 months starting in May and you do 3 more months starting in August or something. It would be that first one of the year would be your deadline, and it would go from there. And then obviously we have the alternative table that Duncan has up right now as far as going off of the VIN when that's applicable. Vehicles that are non-op registered through DMV, we understand to be in a different category than they were with truck and bus. And so because, we don't believe those vehicles are truly operating, and under this scenario, then that would be true. But if they are operating, then they would need to ensure that their vehicle has been repaired and maintained as appropriate, kind of thing. Apportion plates. I mean, IRP, or if any of those types of things, they would, if they're I would say that they're California IRP, then they would fall under California, and non-California would not. Hung Lee, do you have anything to add to that before I say something completely incorrect?
Yeah, I can add to that. Yes.
Thank you.
California IRP, then yeah, go with your registration day. But if it's out of state, then you go with the last digit of V number. And also for the previous question, the partial registration, basically you do pay a full registration fee to DMV, but you only pay partial waive fee whenever you use the truck. So that means that you still need to meet the full requirements for all those play. Yeah. And also truck with SE plate, special equipment plates, still also need to meet our requirements.
Thank you. Someone asked if the gas battery hybrid would be included in Clean Truck Check, and the answer was no. I thought at the beginning it was said that hybrids were included. So for hybrids, it's diesel hybrid or alternative fuel hybrid. Gasoline hybrids are not included under Clean Truck Check. How do you get a duplicate of your inspector license or require the license number? It should be in your completed Clean Truck Check tester passed exam.
Yeah, you can send a request to hd@arb.ca.gov mailbox. Then we can send a copy of your certificate, or you can provide all your contact information, and we can confirm your identity, and we'll send you a tester ID number. Thank you.
Thank you, Huntley. What will happen to companies that have out-of-state tags but have a base here in California? If their trucks are operating in California, they will need to go through the registration and testing process based on the non-California registered vehicle program, and their deadlines will all be based on the last digit of their VIN number. Emergency vehicles, as long as they're in the narrowly defined definition of emergency vehicle in vehicle code 165, are not subject to Clean Truck Check at all. If they've been moved out of the narrow definition, then they will be in based on their VIN numbers if they're exempt plates, and they'll be required to do both testing and pay fees. Do trucks not older than 4 years old still need to be registered and pay the $30? Yes. Even brand new trucks will need to go through the registration and fee process. And then the only exception to that of non-gasoline burning vehicles is the very low emissions natural gas vehicles that have 0.01 NOx, of which I have recently been informed there are currently none available for purchase. So the answer to that is yes, even new trucks are subject to the regulation. Can you please provide more info and examples of vehicles subject to these requirements? And maybe a few examples of vehicles that are not subject to these requirements. For that, the simple answer is any vehicle that's over 14,000 GVW that burns something other than diesel, or sorry, burns something other than gasoline, is subject to the regulation. And then the only things that are not subject to the regulation are in a pretty short list, but I will bring that list up just so we can take a look at it. So these are the vehicles that are excluded from the list. So we have zero emission heavy duty vehicles, emergency vehicles as defined in vehicle code 165, tactical military vehicles that are in deployable condition, motorhomes registered outside of California, vehicles with permanent historic vehicle license plates, vehicles operating under a CARB-issued experimental permit, vehicles operating under the governor's emergency declaration, heavy-duty gasoline vehicles, and new vehicles with engines certified to the most stringent optional NOx standard, of which currently there are none available. Will testing be required for trucks that are non-opt? If they're truly in non-operational status, no. Can you say what range might be that private testers charge? That will be entirely up to the market. The tests should only take a few minutes if they're based on an OBD charge. So my guess would be that a standard emission shop will probably charge an hour of book time. So whatever your local rate for an hour of book time for a technician is, my guess would be anywhere from $50 to $250, but that will be entirely up to the technicians and their customers, I imagine. What if the motorhome is pre-DEF? So as long as the motorhome is within its specific opacity restriction based on the different tables for engine model years, as long as it's within its opacity limits, it's fine. So if it's legal to operate in California and you're below your opacity limits for the model, for the age of the engine, it's still legal to operate and can be compliant with Clean Truck Check. I have ag trucks that are registered from May to October. When would I have to do the test? Also have 3 trucks year round. Could I do them all at the same time? So the trucks that are temporary registration, you would essentially have to register them or get a Clean Truck Check test done before their first registration deadline. If they're monthly, that would be within the first month. You could potentially get all of your trucks registration dates moved around at the DMV, and then you would be able to do their clean truck testing all at the same time. Do CARB fleet vehicles used for long-term testing need to be added to the database? I do not know the answer to that one. Someone else could jump in.
They are exempt. They do need to get an experiment permit. So then they can be exempt from this program.
Okay, thank you, Ung Lee. Are there ways our technicians can practice the testing process? In terms of OBD testing, when you purchase the devices, they can usually be run in test mode or in like airplane mode with the Wi-Fi turned off. It won't do a compliant test, but you can certainly test to do that. And then for the opacity testing with opacity meters, during the training process for how to use those, the technicians will be trained on how to do that.
Duncan,
Yeah.
I have a little bit of information to add to that. Oh, Hung Lee, go ahead, please.
Yeah, if you purchase a new OBD test device, and when you first time submit your test result, you can put it on a note, say this is a testing only, practice only, and we will realize the data. We won't use data to determine, it's a fit meeting our program or not. So just put a note on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Jessica, did you have something else to add?
Yes, the California Council on Diesel Education and Technology offers a similar credentialed clean truck tester program course that offers hands-on activity. That class is based on a fee, so there is a charge for that class, and it's not sponsored by CARB. But if folks are looking for more hands-on participation when they are getting trained to be a credentialed clean truck tester, that is an option. I'll put the link in the chat for that too. It's not a CARB sponsored thing, but it's at your own expense and your own interest.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. I'm from the school district and have 24 diesel buses. Can we do opacity tests, one in December and one in June instead of every month? The opacity testing deadlines are based on the deadlines for each vehicle. So you can definitely group them based on their registration, or since they're school buses, I imagine it would be based on their VIN numbers. And you can group them together and do them in batches with as long as those 90 days overlap. We can't just set it to December and June. No, they will be based individually on each vehicle. In terms of wirelessly connected OBD scanners, if there's a wireless connection, what happens in areas of operation in California with little or no connectivity, and there are quite a few. There are a few different options. There are devices that allow you to connect via satellite. There are devices that can extend Wi-Fi range, and I believe they are also looking into other potential options, but I'd have to defer to Hung Lee and Beth to get more information on that one.
Yeah, we know it's challenge. That's why we try to help people become credential tester statewide. So you have to move your tractor to somewhere with a internet connection. Yeah, that's the only suggestion we can have.
Yeah, and does this clean truck check apply to non-registered diesel trucks over 14,000 GVWR that are operating only at a mine site and never going on any roadway? Do you have an answer to that one, Hung Lee?
Yeah, if it's a non-DMV registered truck, and also they are used mostly for off-road purpose, then for that case, we don't consider it's on-road trucks. But whenever this truck put on a local or freeway, and then there will be meet a on-road definition, so that will be need to meet our requirements.
Okay, but if it never goes on a road, it doesn't have to meet our requirements.
Right. Yeah, because sometimes just an engine alone or just some basic off-road equipment feature, so that way they don't have to meet our requirement.
Thank you, Hung Lee.
And the theory on that too would be that they're classified as planned non-op with DMV, because that technically means that they're just not operating on public roads and highways, not necessarily that it's not operating at all.
Okay. Clean
Duncan?
truck check. Yes, Jessica.
Just a time check, it's 11:45. We have about 15 minutes remaining in our webinar time. So I'm asking if you could focus on the questions that are specifically related to public fleets, and we can follow up with private vehicle owners with their questions afterwards.
Okay.
Thanks.
I will do my best. Okay, so when will we know our vehicle information has been uploaded into the database? That's pretty much everybody. And you'll be able to check in early October. Is GeoTab an approved device for downloading info? Not currently. We're trying to work with them to get them certified, though. Are transit buses with natural gas engines subject to clean truck check? If so, how about non-OBD? Yes. Anything that's doesn't burn gasoline, so that includes natural gas and diesel, are subject to clean truck check. And if you don't have an OBD, they are just subject to the visual inspection if they're older than 2018. If they're newer than 2018, they do have to be OBD tested. Does the last digit of a VIN matter on non-OBD2 vehicles as far as when they are due? Or can we do them all at the same time, August, for example? Their testing will be based on the biannual schedule. So it'd be the last digit of their VIN number, and then 6 months opposed to that. If a vehicle is in a repair shop for repair and cannot perform an OBD submission, how do we flag that in the CARB database so that there's no penalty? You will inform enforcement that is undergoing repairs, and if they deem it necessary, they will give you an extension. Are small public fleets in low population counties subject to testing? Yes, all vehicles that meet the requirements for clean truck check will be subject to testing. For public utilities, do we have to report PSIP this year on the website? Yes. You will have to report any PSIP deadlines that occur before July 1st of next year. Can the $30 fee be paid before testing is done? Can one payment be made for the entire fleet? Beth, do you have a good answer for that one?
Yes, to be clear, it's $30 per vehicle per year. Even if you have to test multiple times during the year, you're welcome to pay that at any time that you choose, as long as you pay it once for that particular compliance year. And yes, we will allow, let's say you have 10 trucks, so it's $300. We will have a batch upload for you to upload the payment so that you don't have to do that 10 times for $30 each truck. So.
Thank you. For school districts, regarding compressed natural gas buses, they will also be subject to clean truck check. If they're older than 2018, they have to do a visual inspection. If they are newer, they have to do the OBD test. To understand the testing timing better, if you have a truck registration due July 1st, 2024, then we have to submit a passing compliance test within 90 days in advance of that date. That is correct. Therefore, a compliance testing process would need to be in place in the April 2024 timeframe. So the compliance testing should be available in between April and July. So anytime in that 90 days before the test is the test deadline. So being able to, you always want to do the testing as far out as possible to avoid any potential delays. And yeah, so you would be able to begin testing as early as April. Does DMV exempt vehicle mean SE plated vehicle? That means SE plated vehicle, military vehicle, federal vehicles, and outside of California vehicles. If readiness is the only thing not met, mill cleared in more than 40 engine hours, would the vehicle still be compliant? No, the list just moved. Okay. Can I go back to page 34? Sure. So vehicle information will be pulled from other CARB databases and be available for checking October 1st. For city fleets with exempt plates, do all trucks over 14,000 pounds have to be in the database by October 2023? No, they have to be in the database by the end of December 2023. So the database will open in October, and the registration deadline for 2023 closes at the end of the year. Will we need to actively manage the CARB vehicle database as we purchase and sell applicable vehicles? We'll now need to manage CARB database on a routine basis in addition to our fleet management system. Yes. You will have 30 days to add or remove the vehicles from the CARB database as they enter or leave your fleet. Would exempt plate buses only be tested once a year? Exempt plate buses will be tested once a year in 2024. And then if they have an OBD device and they're newer than 2013 for a diesel vehicle or newer than 2018 for a compressed natural gas vehicle, they will do the OBD testing 4 times a year. And if they need to go through opacity testing, That will be twice a year. Do state trucks have to register and pay annual fees at the end of the year as well? Yes. State trucks are under the same restrictions as everyone else. Electric buses. So will electric buses still need to be registered in the CARB database and a fee paid even though they're not subject to the program? No. Electric buses are exempt from the program and will not need to be registered or have a fee paid or emissions tested.
We have about 3 minutes left. I just wanted to recap for everybody, if you joined us late or maybe you didn't catch it at the beginning. We will be emailing a handout of the presentation slides that Duncan spoke about after the presentation. It might take us a couple days. And we will also be posting the recording of the webinar on our website. And we'll share that link with you as well. And I just wanted to let folks know we're not going to be able to get to all of your questions. We had a lot of great questions in there, but we will do our best to follow up with those of you who do have a question that we're not going to be able to get to. Unfortunately, if you are registered anonymously or you submitted a question anonymously, we will not be able to follow up with you. So I just want to manage expectations there. So Duncan, I think we have time for a couple more questions.
Mm-hmm. I was looking to see if there was any new public or transit fleet questions that we had not answered yet.
There were a few questions from folks that wanted to know if they were allowed to test more often than they were required to, according to the Clean Truck Check regulation.
You can test more often, but the test has to be submitted within the 90-day window of your deadline for it to count for that specific testing deadline. Once we reach the 4 times a year testing threshold, pretty much every single 90-day window will be part of a testing deadline. So unless you want to test more often than every 90 days, which I can't see any really good reason for.
Yeah, I know people want to make sure they can pass the test result. So even though the first few tests will fail, but as long as the most current test result shows pass, then you'll be fine. You can submit the multiple tests to the OBD system, no problem.
Right. And if you know that your test is going to fail, you can always repair your vehicle first, as long as you're within that 90-day deadline. If you are inspected on the highway and know you're going to fail, that could still potentially lead to a citation. But that's just because your mill is on or you have an emissions related trouble code.
We are at noon.
All right. Thank you everyone for coming and listening to us today, and hopefully we'll be able to answer most of your questions, and we will go through and try and answer all of the questions we will definitely consolidate them. We still have 149 of them open. So we will go through and answer those, as many of those as we can, and get them back to you. Thank you for your time, and have a good rest of your day. Mac, if you could close us out, please.